Since the very beginning of Project Prometheus, we have discussed that the viewer fleet will be an integral part of the human effort to defeat the AI. Now, if you don't know, Project Prometheus was designed to be something that all of you, the viewers, could participate in. And in today's video, we are going to be assembling the Builder's Guide for any viewer fleets to be entered into Project Prometheus. So this is it. This is your call to arms. This is your opportunity to build your very own fleet and submit it to be used in the battles that will follow in Project Prometheus. Hello everyone, my name is Nick and welcome back once again to Project Prometheus. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. This is officially a call to action. So we've been working on Project Prometheus for months now, building ships, different classes of them, going up against the AI in skirmishes. However, the actual war against the AI menace is on the horizon. So at this point in time, I'm officially calling for all of you guys, the viewers, to submit your ships to be included in Project Prometheus. Now, I will post an official deadline in the Discord server, but for now, all you need to know is it's time to start working on them, because soon we're going to be beginning an all-out war against the AI in hopes of destroying it and purging this world of AI evil. Now, you might be wondering, how do I submit my fleet for Project Prometheus? Well, we're going to get into that in this video in a moment, but first we're going to go through each class of ship that has been included in Project Prometheus so far, and we are going to go through all of the specifications so you know exactly what you need to do to build a ship that can be used in Project Prometheus. So before we get into all of the specifics of different classes within Project Prometheus, I'm going to talk about some of the overarching rules that we have. So the idea with this entire thing is that it's supposed to be set in roughly World War II era technology, despite the fact that there's AI involved. So you're basically limited to APS weapons, cram cannons, and torpedoes. Now, you can also have rockets, but the way it works is you either need to have a torpedo, which is a torpedo but with guidance, or you can have a rocket but no guidance. You can't have both a rocket and guidance, which that is a missile. That is outside of the bounds of this project. Besides that, each class is governed by cost limits, and that is the main constraint. This is an example of the Dreadnought class. This is the Wave Breaker, the human Dreadnought. And it is just, oh wow, it's actually quite a bit above. The cost limit is 1.75 million. This is a little over cost right now. But anyway, another general rule is that there are no jet engines allowed. I've just decided to make that rule to encourage a little more innovation with propeller planes. Obviously, you can get as creative as you want with propellers, and the exception to this rule is you are allowed to use steam jets, because that would be period correct, roughly. And, you know, before you get into it, I know there were jet engines in World War II. It's just a choice that we're making for this project to not use them. So the first class that we're going to be talking about today is the Destroyer class. This is the cheapest ship that's been included in Project Prometheus and should be the easiest for you to build. Here we have two destroyers that are used in Project Prometheus. On this side, we have the Hurricane, and on the far side, we have the famed Kerman, known by many as the battering ram for its unusual tendencies. The cornerstone of the Destroyer class is its 75k material cost. You can see the Hurricane is only 70,000. I think the Kerman is actually a little over. Yeah, 75,143. Now, the primary role of destroyers in Project Prometheus is anti-air and anti-submarine warfare, although what you equip your destroyer with is completely up to you. The only constraint is, like with every other ship, you cannot use plasma weapons, railguns, or any of the other advanced fancy weapons. You can use simple weapons, like this casemated gun, APS, cram, and torpedoes. Now with torpedoes, again, this applies to all ships in the entire project, but you may either have a rocket with no guidance or a torpedo with torpedo guidance. So you can't have a missile with guidance. And destroyers, there's no cost, well, there's no size limit. There is a cost limit. These are two examples here, but the destroyer rules will be thrown up on the screen for your reference. But this is what the destroyer class of ship looks like. I would recommend starting here. This is the lightest and easiest ship to build, and a great way to kick things off. So the next class in Project Prometheus is the Cruiser class, or Light Cruiser class. So for these ships, the cost limit is 150, which again, this is slightly over, so I have to do some trimming. But we have here the two cruisers that have been submitted officially. So in the front here is the Barracuda class cruiser, which is the human fleet's cruiser. You can see it's equipped with a pretty potent array of APS cannons. It also has some secondary AA guns, but nothing too crazy. Steam engine in here. There's full videos on all these ships, so you can find those elsewhere on the channel. Also a detection tower. But then you can see the AI's cruiser, which is much more modern looking and a totally different approach. Now this is a good example of how you can take two completely different ideas for the same ship class and kind of get a little creative with it. This is the Thunderclap class cruiser, which was built by ChatGPT, also over the cost limit. Going to need to fix that. Now for the cruiser, besides the cost limit, the usual rule applies where you can only have APS, cram, whatever cannons. However, cruisers are also allowed to have a torpedo armament if that is something that you choose to do. This cruiser does have it, the Barracuda does not. Besides that, the cruiser must be, and let me just confirm this before I say it, the cruiser must be larger or longer than the relevant destroyer in your fleet. Which basically means, ignore that I just blew that up. Very professional here. If you build a destroyer, it has to be shorter than the cruiser. So if we put the Hurricane, which is the AI destroyer, or the Kerman, which is the human one, next to their cruiser counterparts, you'd see that both destroyers are shorter. So next up we have the Heavy Cruiser class. Now for this class, ChatGPT has not yet built its heavy cruiser, or at least not yet revealed it to us at the time of the making of this video. So the ship you see pictured here is the Unsinkable class Heavy Cruiser. Now this ship is in the same vein as the light cruiser, but the cost limit is increased. So the rules are exactly the same. The cost limit for these is 350k, which gives you quite a bit of wiggle room, if you ask me. And you can see this is kind of an example of what you might want to build for your heavy cruiser. Pretty big caliber main armament. Decent secondary. In this case, these are frag weapons. AA armament. I'm probably going to take that out because it's a big waste of money. Yeah, and of course points for cosmetics as always. However, this ship is one of the most free-form in the fleet. You can choose to do basically whatever you want with it. I will say, while a heavy cruiser or any other surface combatant cannot operate underwater during the battle, I did try with this ship to make it something where it was submerged while traveling and then surfaced to take part in combat. I was not smart enough and didn't have enough time to figure that out, but if you want to, go for it. Next up, we start getting into some of the big capital ships of these navies. In this case, the Carrier. Now, the rules for the Carrier are just a little bit unusual, and they might take a little extra understanding, so bear with me here. But first, we have our two examples. So this absolute behemoth of a carrier is the Archon class, which was built by ChatGPT. You can see it is also over its cost limit of 350k. Well, technically not, but that one costs 350k. This is the human carrier, the Hammerhead, I believe it's called, and this is 318, so much cheaper. Now, the way it works with the carrier rules, we want to give you some freedom as to how much money you spend on the planes versus how much money you spend on the actual carrier. So the regulations are: the carrier and the air wing together must cost less than 500k materials. However, the carrier itself it can cost anywhere above 100k and less than 500k. So you're allowed to spend basically as much as you want above 100k on the carrier. And then for the air wing, which we'll talk about specific planes in a second, each plane can cost up to 60k materials if you so choose. And you can choose to devote your airplane cost however you want. You can have as many planes as you want on your carriers. You need at least one. And you can choose to make a little 5k material plane and then have 30 of them, or you can choose to make one 60k plane and a 440k carrier, as long as those numbers add up to 500k in the end. So going back to both of our carriers here, you'll see that while the Hammerhead is a little bit cheaper, which means it's going to have more planes, the Archon itself is much bigger, so it's going to have less planes. You can see these also both have secondary guns. Because of the nature of From the Depths, a carrier in concept is not really as effective as it is in reality. So I would recommend adding some kind of armament to your carrier to make sure they don't just get chewed up in combat, even though both of these do get chewed up in combat. You can see the Hammerhead has a much more aggressive main armament here, as well as a secondary. But yeah, that's the carrier class. So now it's time to talk about aircraft. So the cool thing about Project Prometheus is that I gave people a lot of freedom when it comes to the aircraft, of course, besides the no jet engines rule. So here we have the 4 aircraft that have been built for this project so far. So again, the way it works, the cost of a singular plane is limited to 60k or less. Now, however many planes you have is dependent on how expensive your carrier is. So if you missed that in the previous section, go back and check that out. But here we'll go plane by plane, and we could talk a little bit about what each of these is capable of. So here we have the Corsair, which is built to be more of an interceptor. This is an AI plane, and you can see here it has rockets. Now these rockets are unguided, which means that they are technically allowed. If there was any kind of guidance system on this besides magnets, because they're technically not guidance, then they would be illegal. But since they're just rockets, they are allowed. Now the other thing is these rockets, I actually don't know if these do contain it, but you are allowed to use 1 turns in those rockets. That is allowed. You can also see we have our simple assault cannons here and these ridiculous looking propeller engines. But yes, this is the AI interceptor. Next we have the human interceptor, which is called the Avenger. Now the Avenger has autocannons again. However, it does not have any kind of rockets like its counterpart, the Corsair. What makes the Avenger special, however, is that it is powered by steam jets. So you can see we have a boiler here and steam jets at the back. This is all exposed. Makes this plane very fast. And this is technically something that could have been attainable in this era of technology they were aiming for. So it is allowed. You may use steam jets, but no conventional jets of any kind. Next we have the 2 bombers. So the human bomber is here. This is called the Valentina. Again, you can see we have our engines with propellers. We have our various control surfaces here, detection system, and then in this case, these are torpedoes. They're big old torpedoes. So the Valentina is a torpedo bomber, much like its AI counterpart, the Catalina. The Catalina, instead of having big torpedoes, has several small torpedoes, but overall same configuration. We have our engines, all this, and the cost of this is only 25k. The Valentina, also 25k. The Avenger, 11, and the Corsair, 10. So of course you can make your plans however you want, and we encourage creativity. I want you guys to do crazy stuff as long as it's within the rules. But these are some inspiration for your designs if you choose to go the more conventional route. So the next class we're going to talk about is the Submarine class, another chance for some big innovation from you guys. So here we have the 2 submarines that have been built for this project so far. Now the Submarine class can cost up to 70k materials, and they may be equipped with any kind of APS, cram, or simple weapons, as well as torpedoes. Now the constraint for submarines is that while they are allowed to occasionally surface to use their guns, they must operate primarily underwater. Now I don't have an explicit definition of that, but our moderators will review your designs, and if they decide that it's too much like a surface combatant, it won't be eligible. So do with that information what you will. Here we have the human submarine, kind of futuristic, unconventional looking. This is called the Cyclops, and basically its entire battle plan is one huge torpedo. So you could choose to do something like that, or you could choose to build something more balanced like the Leviathan, which has several small torpedoes in the front, as well as several in the back, and a much larger hull structure here. So you can see this is what the Leviathan looks like. Also, for some reason, ChatGPT insisted on having a fuel engine in this particular submarine. So not sure what that was about. But submarines can make a really big difference in the tide of battles, as we've seen. So there's a lot of opportunity for creativity with this particular class. When we first started Project Prometheus, however long ago it was, I honestly have no idea, we started by building an AI battleship. That is what kicked this whole thing off. And the AI battleship that we built is pictured here. This is the Vanguard, named by ChatGPT, and the ship that started this entire conflict in the first place. And this is an example of the Battleship class of Project Prometheus. Now, the Battleship class initially had a 350k material ceiling. However, as I learned a lot more about this game, and as we progressed through the project, I sort of realized that that was way too low. So while this ship still costs way under that limit, the limit for battleships has now been increased to 475k. And you can see here, this is the Jebediah. This is the human battleship. This one is even cheaper at 269. So now, the battleship limit is 475k. As far as specifications, battleships just have to have the same APS cram, simple weapon armaments as any other ship. The only constraint is that a battleship should be equipped to fulfill the flagship role of the fleet 90% of the time. There is one other ship class that can occasionally act as the flagship, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Your battleship should be imposing. It should be able to deliver a powerful attack, as you can see. I mean, this design is severely outdated at this point, but big guns, big secondaries, some AA if you choose, lots of armor. The Jebediah is more of a heavy armored ship, whereas the Vanguard is a much quicker but less armored ship. Go whatever direction you choose with this. Creativity is encouraged. I mean, if you want to make something that is like a 5x5x5 cube, but it's just filled with cram cannons, like, do whatever you want. Get creative with it. But yeah, that is the battleship class. And finally, we have the greatest class of them all, the Dreadnought class. Now, while technically Dreadnought basically just refers to a battleship before the Dreadnought class battleship, we have here what I am calling a Dreadnought for the purposes of this project, which just basically means a huge battleship. So you can see here, this is the Wavebreaker. This is the human Dreadnought. The Dreadnought is intended to be basically a fortress that floats. This ship should not be necessarily intended for a main combat role, and more as a projection of power and sort of a last resort. This is a true capital ship. Now, the Wavebreaker has its flaws, but it is extremely powerful, and this is basically your chance in this project to take as many APS cannons, cram cannons, and simple weapons as you can and pack them into a single monster of a ship. Now, the cost limit for the Dreadnought class is, 1.75 million. So that is quite a bit of wiggle room. You can actually see in last week's video, we pitted the Wavebreaker against basically every other ChatGPT ship and increasingly large fleets of them, and the Wavebreaker beat every single wave of those ships handily. So your goal with the Dreadnought should be a super survivable, super deadly, power projecting monster of a ship. So now the fun part. How do you submit your very own ships to be included in Project Prometheus? The answer is it's actually quite simple. So the first step is you have to join our Discord, which you can find in a link in the description. And then the second step is build your ships, obviously. Follow the specifications that we set forth in this video and in the rules document, also in the description, if I remember, which is a big if. Beyond that, take your ship, upload the blueprint file to the Discord channel called Prometheus Builds, and our shipyard supervisor will take your build and officially incorporate it into Project Prometheus, give it to me to use in videos, and eventually there will be a custom campaign included in Project Prometheus, and that will be playable by all of you guys. Some of the best ships will be handpicked by us to be included in that custom campaign, but it's really as simple as that. And if you just want to make ships for fun, maybe you want to make a Dreadnought but nothing else, go for it, and feel free to share that in our Discord server as well. Whole point of this project is it's supposed to be something where all of you can get involved and build your own versions of these ships, sort of like an open tournament in some way. But this is the official recruiting call. We want your ships to join our fleet. And in the next few weeks, Project Prometheus is going to transition more from shipbuilding to a lot more combat. So if you're able to get your ships in, I can't guarantee it, but there's a chance that they'll make it into these videos and into the official Project Prometheus series. But with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have questions about the specifications, feel free to comment. I will update the rule doc with FAQs as much as possible. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.